I'm going to jump onto well, let me share my screen first. Cool. All right. Yeah, go ahead and we're good.
You're good.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Space Lab. It's our interactive art and immersive art meetup group in Austin. And over the last year, we've been putting together some artist talks and company talks with some people local and abroad on the subject of interactive immersive art. And it's organized by me, Kyle, Lisa, and also Barna. Barna's not on this, but he's definitely involved with organizing a lot of this. A meetup for those interested in creating new and activating spaces. Experimental spaces include immersive art, public art, exhibits, live/workspaces, intentional communities, and much more. So as you see, we actually interviewed White Void a while back. We also have interviewed a few other artist companies, Coco Lab, and some manufacturing companies as well for LEDs. And today we're actually joined by Mandy Mandelstein, and she's here to talk about her creative process and her projects. And yeah, we also accept donations. So if you want, go ahead and shoot a $10 donation. It goes towards funding more speakers, but also it goes towards our scholarship for Data Geek. I can talk about that a little bit more, but if you want to follow more of these talks, we have a meetup site and we also have a Facebook group. So feel free to jump in that and follow us, Space Lab, for more talks. We've got a few more awesome ones before the end of the year. And we're also planning the rest of the year as well. There's also a survey that we'll send out. So feel free to keep up with that and tell us what you like and what you want to see more of. Here's a breakdown for the scholarship. It goes towards spreading the word about the scholarship program. And to tell you more about Data Geek, Kyle, do you want to talk about Data Geek for a second?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, man. Yeah, hold on. Let me get myself up here. All right. Yeah, we can see everyone there, kind of grouped together. Awesome. So, I am Kyle Evans. As Dom said, one of the people that also helped to run and organize Space Lab. So I also am the managing director of Data Geek, which is a school based out of Austin, Texas, for immersive art and technology and creative coding and all of the good stuff that we all love to do. So yeah, we've been around for about 5 years now, doing all sorts of stuff. We are running all of our classes online right now and expanding into so many different ways. And we're really excited for Space Lab to be a part of that system that's growing with us, and we're able to bring in awesome artists like Mandy and talk to them. So our scholarship program, which has expanded immensely over the last couple quarters, which is really important for us to make sure that that funding is getting into the hands of people that actually need it. So money goes a long way when you donate to Data Geek. So if you're donating to Data Geek, it's going to go directly into our scholarship fund, which we have multiple scholarship funds available. We have full ride scholarship funds. We have $100 scholarship funds. We have BIPOC scholarship funds. We have a whole lot to offer. So anything that you're putting forward is always greatly appreciated. We're a nonprofit organization, so all of it just goes back to the students and back to our instructors to help us continue to make this thing keep going. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about Data Geek, you can always find us at datageek.com. Follow us on Facebook and all of that good stuff.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, all this stuff is great too because it goes towards broadening the horizon of art and technology and bringing on people that maybe wouldn't even have even know that these cool and creative ways to use technology for creativity and create experiences even exist, and maybe not even know where to start. So yeah, feel free to check it out, and any donation is greatly appreciated. And then also, yeah, I guess with that said, so I'll do a little introduction of Mandy, but at the same time, I want to also let everybody know that this one we're going to have, we have a 7 o'clock cutoff. So if you could please hold your questions for the end and just throw them in the chat too, if you want to just queue up, I guess, for any questions that you want to hold on to early in our presentation and whatnot. So let me stop sharing. All right. Cool. Yeah, so Mandy is an amazing creative and technical person that I met actually working when I was traveling, and we randomly met in Berlin on New Year's, which was funny because we met in a creative lab studio space, and this isn't specific, but it was super interesting because it was very serendipitous. We both realized that she was in New York at the time, but we both realized we're from Austin. And then every time we meet up and hang out and talk, I learned something amazing and new, something new about her work and how she works. But she's it's very hard to find somebody who works in the creative and project management side, also coming from a film background, and then also has the technical understanding. And Mandy has all of that, and she brings a lot of new things to the world around us. So I'm excited to have her today. And Mandy, with that, I'll let you take it.
Cool. Thanks, Dom, for that intro. Yeah, I do think it's pretty crazy that we were in Berlin and somehow still found the other Texan.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mandy. I guess I'll share my presentation. I'm also happy to make this a little more casual. I give some more formal talks, and so I prepared slides, but I'm happy to answer questions. Let me pull the chat up too, so I have it. I have the chat open, so if you put anything in there, I'll see it. So yeah, I have a studio called Modular. I spend about half the year doing work through my studio with clients, and I spend about the other half of the year working for ad agencies and brands, doing some branded stuff. And we are a storytelling and experience design studio. There we go. I like to say that we do artistic implementations of storytelling and technology in the physical world, which is kind of a weird thing I've been thinking a lot about with this COVID lockdown. Is like, for a long time, I was like, it's all about using tech in like the real world to bring people together into physical spaces and not just be behind phones. And clearly we kind of are living in a different time. So if we have time at the end, I'd love to discuss that with all of you art installation folks and how you're dealing with that. This is me, and this is how you can find me on social medias. A lot of people ask me what I do, and I've never really had a good answer for them because these are all things that I've been hired to do by people. And there's a few more I think I left off of there, which is why I kind of came to narrative technologist. Someone else had that, I think, at some lab, and I was like, wait, that's perfect, because some people are like, you're just a software person. I'm like, no, actually, I'm this creative person. Like, I'm a filmmaker at heart, and like, I've always just used the tech as one of my tools. So like, I learned to program because I was like, I need to know my tools. I loved cameras growing up, so I was always super into that. I lived somewhere there. Those are like my circles. So I really am sort of heavy on the design and content, and I do some code stuff in there as well. This is me as a 16-year-old. I think this was actually taken in front of the state capitol when I was in high school. I started taking classes when I was 13 at the Austin School of Film. Made a feature film through them when it was still over on the east side, when just on the other side of 35 of East 6th Street was still like not a fun place to be at night. But I kind of got this like ragtag DIY filmmaking education very young, and grew up going to South by Southwest, lied about how old I was to edit to that for them so I could get a badge and go for free. So I really got like my film education early. I decided to go to New York University to get a degree in film production. I was like, this is a cool career. I think I want to do it. So moved to New York City, never having really been there before. I have no family on the East Coast, which was an interesting move. But I think was serendipitous and sort of was an integral part to me ending up like where I am now, because there was this weird floor in the Tisch building, and the elevator would just open on this floor and you'd see all this crazy stuff. And like every single time the door would open, you know, there might be like a robot or there's an interactive mirror. There's a Daniel Rosen piece in the back. I don't think you can see it very well in this photo, but there's a grad department called ITP, the Interactive Telecommunications Program, for anyone who's not familiar. They have undergrad now, but they didn't at the time. But a friend freshman year was like, hey, let's go to this show. And I went and was just sort of mind blown by all of the projects and the installations. And I think one that stuck with me from that first show is somebody had built like a Pac-Man controller with like a rock climbing belt. So you had to like move your hips around to play Pac-Man. And everyone was just like having so much fun. I was like, this is really cool. I want to do this. Like, I don't know why. Everyone in the film program was like, what are you doing? I don't know. So I've kind of felt like a misfit for a lot of my life and career. So now I sort of am somewhere in the tech wild west, whatever that means. But I don't like to do tech for tech's sake. And I've thought a lot over the last like 5 years about like why I'm interested in technology, and like I'm still a filmmaker at heart. Storytelling is still like what drives me. And this is like sort of the term I've come to name of like what my overall goal is like context aware media, which is really sort of like location-based storytelling that is aware of its surroundings, and is really about blending like the real and digital together. So I think a lot about place as platform and sort of why people use places and what happens there and people's different purposes for places. And I'm really excited about like this future where there's this perpetual virtual layer that exists on top of the physical world that like we don't have to put there. It's already kind of amazing to have watched in my career already how quickly the technology's changed and what's possible now that wasn't possible then. I remember when I first started getting into interactive media, smartphones were still relatively new to a lot of people that weren't like tech heads. And so the idea that you could use this computer in someone's pocket to do something like totally unheard of, it was just like that was a barrier for like making work too. You're like, cool, someone has a pretty powerful computer in their pocket, but if you can't get them out of that mindset that this is just a phone, like it doesn't work. So I think a lot less about that now when we're creating work, because everyone just lives their entire lives on their phones. But in this world, like it all starts with like some piece of technology that says, I am here. Like this is, I am here. And when you start to think about like, I am here, you have to like also consider that the real world already has a lot of systems in places and people already have like a lot of assumed behaviors. So when you're making work for physical locations, it's really important to think about like everything else that's going on in the context in which they're created. I've seen a lot of work with technology that just like totally ignores a lot of that. And I think it's kind of a bummer and a failure to not, or I've seen places where it's like totally in conflict of what's there. I was presenting at an Ad Week thing a few years back. We had like a table and I was doing like an AR installation and some guy came up to me and was like, I'm sorry, I'm just really dizzy. There's like a Verizon booth upstairs and someone just shoved a VR headset on my face and it was a demo and I don't know what it was and now I'm like sick. So I think it's like really important, and as like an artist and both in my like personal and professional projects, is to like take into account like everything that's around it. This was a slide I actually made for a class I taught last year, but just trying to think through like all these different things, like what is context, if you could like measure context, because a lot of times, you know, with interactive and immersive work, it's all about like measuring things and reacting to it. So these are just like a few things that inevitably, when something exists in the real world, you have to take into account, and is also like something that you could possibly like use as an input in some way, or an output for that matter, really. A lot of people, VR kind of came out like 3 or 4 years into my career in this interactive space, and everyone was like, yeah, VR, you do VR. And I was like, yeah, maybe it's like cool for some things, but like, I don't know about this. And this is actually a video that I took during the Women's March just after Trump was elected in New York City, I stopped into the Microsoft store on Fifth Avenue to use their bathroom, and walked out and saw this. And it was just like such a telling photo of like the tech at the time. Like it's still in like VR was super popular. And I was just like, this is like so everything that's wrong in one image. You know, there were like hundreds of or thousands and thousands of people outside, and this dude decided that was the day he was going to walk through the crowd and pop into the store. And anyways, so I guess I have a bunch of projects here. This was the first project. This was actually my senior thesis or junior year thesis project at NYU. I just discovered projection mapping, and I made this short film where I built a white set on a soundstage. It was called Anima, which is like the concept of finding the opposite of you somewhere in the world at some point. So I built this whole bedroom set of white furniture and projection mapped videos onto it. And they were sort of these like GIF-like moments from archival films from the 50s and 60s. And so there's like a female side to the bedroom and a male side to the bedroom. And it was all these things of like how to go on a date and like how to do this. And these like really kind of weird films from a while ago. That told you the right way to do things, which I think is like something I grapple a lot with an artist, the sort of like, you should do this. And I think some of that maybe comes out of like not ever quite feeling at home in one place. So it was around that time that the Kinect came out, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then shortly after school, I actually decided to start a studio called Luxloop with this guy, Ivailo Getov, who's an amazing developer and technical director. And we actually met in film school and worked on some music videos together. And we were both sort of like the misfits of tech, working on stuff. And we were like, do we go to grad school? And I was like, I don't know, let's just start a company. And maybe people will pay us to do some things while we figure all this out. And shockingly, it worked in hindsight. So I'm glad that happened. So this was one of the first projects we made together, which was an art project. I just like had a weird dream one night where I was like, imagine this wall of eyeballs that followed you as you walked. And I told him about it. He was like, yeah, that would be cool. Let's do it. So we did some different experiments. And this was, we spent a day with some friends. This is actually his now wife, who let us put some markers on their faces and chin. We had this like crazy grid to capture the eyeballs in the way we needed it. But this is like the source. So this experiment was really about how can I take like filmic imagery and put it into an interactive form? Because at the time, a lot of the interactive work that I was seeing was so digital feeling, and that's just like not, I've always been about like real people and real aesthetics. And so I was like, let's see what we can do. So this is like the source for it. This is a quick video of it in installation. So it's pretty fun, and it's a really fun piece to like watch people play with. Something that really interested me and still interests me is sort of this idea of like passive interaction, of something that just grabs someone out of the world that can exist there and they don't even know they have to have it. Like half the fun is watching people watch other people that don't realize what it's doing. So we've been fortunate to share this at some festivals across the world. Here it is in Detroit. We got to put them on the street, which was pretty cool. For their De-Electricity Festival a couple years ago. It was in Mexico. It was in a gallery setting in LA a couple years back as well. So it's always been interesting to put it in different contexts, and it is a little bit creepy, but also cool. Yeah, and that was sort of like the first foray into like breaking apart filmic content into like digital things. And we even built it in a way you can actually replace all the eyeballs and move them around and like make them smaller or bigger, because like we had no money at the time and we were like, we don't know where this will get installed. We need it to be scalable in a way that it can get reinstalled. So it's still an idea of like big projected walls you can play. This is a more recent one that was just kind of like a quick sketch we did called You Can Play This Wall with Chords, which we put at a party in LA, but just had this idea to like have a keyboard controlled wall. So the keys, it could detect whether you're playing a major or a minor chord, and then would pull in sort of like positive or negative imagery, and sort of build based on the number of keys that you are playing. So this is just like a sample of some of the clips that were in the system. Just like another fun experiment. So I first it was like play with the interactive, see how this works with footage. But then I was like, okay, but like, how do we use this for a story? And this was a quick project. I think this was actually in 2014. We were like, let's start a company. And we hopped on a bus and we went to Boston and we went and did this hackathon at MIT called Hacking Arts, and ended up deciding to work on this project called Screen Motion for the day. Or for the weekend. And so we're thinking about like breaking up a space into like interaction zones and how you might use that to edit a film. So looking at like film context and playing with like, I guess from like a philosophical point of view, like each color zone could be a different emotion. It could be a different part of the story. Starting to think about how you break up space as like a control mechanism. We just did like a quick test. So that in filmmaking, there's the two shot. It's a really standard way to like shoot a conversation of two people talking to each other. So that was one way we were like, oh, we can have it where if you walk to one side, you see one person's point of view. And if you walk to the other side, you see the other person's point of view. Then we also played with the emotion and we filmed this really bad conversation where you could be like upset or flirty or sad or happy. And so based on where you were, it would change sort of like what that character's emotion was in the scene. And we just like played around with some footage. We never really like fully made a project with this, but playing with the idea of like close up or far away or sort of changing shots based on like your relationship with the screen. Yeah, that was just from a weird video that somebody made about us. Actually, I'll skip ahead to another project because that was sort of related in thinking. This was a project I did for an ad agency last year. I won't go into it much. It had some big clients. The project turned out really different than I thought it would when I said I would do it. It was about influencers, but it was a really interesting experience to play with storytelling more at a basic level. I'd sort of moved and started doing more AR and physical stuff. But it's for this platform called Echo that's online. That's like a click-based choose your own adventure story video platform that in the agency, they called me and they were like, hey, this is about influencers. Do you want to do this show? It was supposed to be scripted. It ended up being with real influencers and sponsored by Walmart. So it changed a lot in the content, but I got to prototype a lot and really think about like what when you only have click as an option, and then like how do you connect a character with a viewer. I was also the main writer for this show, ended up creative directing it. So it was a really interesting experience of like how to get connection and how could a simple interaction like actually engage someone, and then how do you keep someone engaged through the video. It ended up being sort of, I don't know, we used these like real world objects, and it was sort of like the first episode was a horoscope personality quiz through her asking you questions and you answering by things around her. But it was sort of this interesting, really real look and like getting a lot of experience with like breaking down what adding interactivity to video means. Because you might just see this like one narrative flow where you pick a dress and you pick an accessory and you're like, cool. And then you're like, I want to do more. But these were like all the different shots you need to just do that simple flow and interactive and have all the different options. And these were this top one is like all 4 episodes and all the nodes. And like, if you think about editing, each one of those nodes is its own timeline. There were 198 nodes, I think, in the end across everything. So in terms of like coordinating graphics, coordinating scripting, coordinating it was a lot, but I learned a lot through it. And it was a really interesting experience. So that was sort of, I guess, where like branching narratives, like starting with like the physical, and then this was an opportunity to really explore it on like a bigger project. Let me find where I was. All right, so this is like an older one. I think this was 2016 in the fall. Somebody had seen our eyeball wall installation and was like, we want to do something cool, like an interactive dinner party during Miami Art Basel. And they're like, we're going to do VR while we eat. And we were like, that seems kind of disastrous. They had a Michelin chef on board. And I was like, it was like when it was still like the DK2, I think, or like the Samsung Gear had just come out, and I was like, you need to hire someone, like each person needs an attendant for their VR headset. So we decided, and we're like, also at dinners, you talk and you interact. So we fortunately convinced them to let us do like a room scale projection, or like a 360 designed projection system. Because we're like, what if we can just make the room VR, and that seems more appropriate. That is a really grainy, bad photo of the final thing. But they had a chef on board who made a menu, and then we translated their menu into this like story world that evolved through the course of the night. The theme was Black Cloak. So they had like the servers in cloaks that like greeted you when you started in this forest. And there were sort of these transition moments through the evening. So like it started in this forest, and there were moments of like activity, and then there was sort of like a docile moment while you eat. And then under the ocean, there was a city one. There was an egg one that was a cloaked character. The eggs were hard. And then like dessert. I think the dessert one was my favorite. That is my hand piping clouds, but it just like went, and they slowly floated, and there was like a cool ice cream air balloon. Yeah, so that was a project. That's sort of the back end of it. That was that. And then another big story, this was like the first big story thing we did as a studio. We got the first year of the Minneapolis Art and Technology grant to make this project. It was a project we'd sort of been toying around with in our like, how do we do story? How can we use this for storytelling? At the time, Avilo had started playing around with Bluetooth beacons, and we were like, okay, where would we put this? Like, who would actually let us put this in their space? Because like, this is going to be pretty involved. Do something like this, who could we get to give us money? And it was just sort of serendipitous that they had this grant, we applied. We got it. So we made a project called Overheard that was based on eavesdropping on people's conversations in a museum. Because as creative people, and especially living in New York, we go to museums often. And we always had fun sort of assigning stories to people. You like hear one snippet, and then you like write this whole script in your head for like who they are, where they came from, like what they're doing. So it was a location-aware mobile app, and I consider it sort of audio AR. Because everything was mapped into the museum, and it knew where you were. It was location aware. This was before the big modern AR push. So this is the interface. We were like, how do we design an interface that works, but we don't want anyone to look at this. Like, we actually want them to put it away while they're walking around. So here is a short audio sample. Ooh, I hope this works because I have headphones on. Can you guys hear it? No. Give me 1 second. Let me reshare.
Lady?
How about now?
No, in the painting.
I don't know.
It's George Washington.
Is he a ghost?
No, he's the first president of the United States. And I'm gonna play him in the class play.
Really?
Well, I still have to audition, but details.
So that was a clip from one of the stories. We actually had 5 different stories that were like full 15 to 18 minute like scripted audio narratives that take place in the museum. We had a couple of old friends, we had musicians, we had a couple on the first date, a family that like splits apart. Grandpa goes, takes the kids, and the kids run away because he tells them that the museum's haunted, and then like the parents go off and have some quiet time. So we wanted these stories to feel like they lived in the space and were of the space. And so we spent like a week there researching and talking to all of the guards about their favorite stories. We set up these little placards and like a phone number, and had people from the museum like call us and tell us things they'd overheard. And a lot of those came to be like, there are these little snippets that you just hear that aren't part of the bigger stories. But this is how all the stories mapped into the museum. Each color is a different character. I think it's the next slide. How many? Yeah. So we had 5 short stories. We covered 97 galleries and 3,000 years of art through all the different stories. Because we couldn't be there, we built this cool little map with 360 videos. So we could go back, and when we were writing the scripts with the screenwriter we were working with, like see what was around. Because again, if you're like standing in the museum, you need to know what's around you. That was actually one of the biggest challenges of this project. Is we got there for our first meeting, and they were like, 300 pieces of art moved last year, or maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was 1,000. I don't remember now. It was a while ago. So we had to figure out how we could make this thing like live and accommodate that without needing to be updated by like a tech team. Like we didn't want to do that. The budget wasn't big enough for that. So we were fortunate the museum actually had a pretty robust API that would show when things went on and off view. And we also worked with the curatorial staff to like figure out what wouldn't move. Like there are some things in the museum that just don't move, like this Chuck Close painting at the end. So we knew we had like a list of things that were safe, and then we used a lot of those as wayfinding, or like verbal wayfinding in some of the scripts. It was never like turn left, be like, oh look, let's go look at that car, or like things like that. So it was a lot of fun to sort of play with that, and then like write these stories and see how they feel in real space, and then also like bring them into the real space and be like, oh wait, I don't know where we're going. Like, you know, there's no way, okay, we need to write a line in here that like gets people moving in the right direction through the next room. Oh, and all those characters do cross paths at some point, so you can decide to like hop onto a different story. We also played with, so the museum's API actually allowed us to have it live update in real time. So if there was something we knew might move, we would record like a less descriptive version of that line that maybe wasn't talking about like that specific art that was there, but like something more broad. Like in a couple places, there's like a scroll, like a big scroll thing. So it's not the same scroll, but fun fact, like some paper can only be on display for like 2 months a year, or it like degrades. So there's like all sorts of conservation things. But we also played with bringing in like the weather and some of the architectural elements.
Oh, it really is beautiful.
It's funny how a gloomy day can sometimes make everything look perfect.
And then here's a second version of that line.
Oh, it really is beautiful.
Just look at those clouds. I'm so glad the sun decided to come out today. You know, we should go to the park after this. It's beautiful out.
So we played with pulling in like real-time weather data and stuff like that to just add these like little moments that were like magical moments where what the story world matched the real world. Would anyone ever notice? Probably not, unless we told them about it. But like, I think those are all the little like details that are gonna like need to really be there to like help sell this. But like little moments of magic or something that I think are really important. And then I think I was always more interested in augmented reality because it doesn't do this. And a friend introduced us to a French artist named Pierre Huyghe, who's a contemporary artist whose work, he calls it relational aesthetics, but he works a lot with like pulling lots of different elements together and putting them like at odds with one another and like creating these systems and then just letting them like go live on. So he works with a lot of living creatures, but he's always been interested in sort of like the intersection of like man, machine, and animal, and technology kind of fits into the machine. So he was preparing this big exhibition for Sculpture Project Monster in Germany. And this was the final exhibition space. And he wanted to include, so within the space, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse? Yeah, so this is a beehive that has bees in it. There's fish in here. There were peacocks wandering around. There were like 50,000 flies that were mated and released within the space. And then in here, there are human cancer cells in this incubator. So all of these things are laced with like IoT devices and different things that are monitoring the space. And so changes in the living out here would change the environment for the cancer cells, which changes like their rate of growth. And so in the system, he was imagining he wanted some sort of augmented virtual creature that was living, that was like responsive to the living as well. So we worked to develop the AR app that was this virtual creature that was responsive. So it was responsive to the cancer cell growth. So this is like sort of the whole system behind all the like logic that like you wouldn't see this in person, but like very detailed down to the things he's thinking about, like ammonia in the soil and all these different levels and things. that kind of like change nature over time. There were some more planning things. He was really into, in this space, there were these pyramids up on the sky. And so he like used that as an aesthetic. And because he wanted it, he wasn't really into like the digital look. He wanted it to just blend in. He decided to model the pyramids after the things that were already there. So it sort of blends in with all of it. So this was actually the server side view. This was like the first, it was a synced AR so everyone could see it because it was like a virtual creature. It needed to only live in the space and stay there. So we were able to sort of combine a few AR tech and the beacons to allow this to like actually work with some smart design to like not tie it too closely to the physical world. Cause this is like before ARKit and like all SLAM tracking was just for like tabletop kind of scale. And we were looking at like a giant ice rink and keeping something. So this was the back end view of it running. There's like, we worked with him to write this like complex living algorithm of how these things like move and grow. They do go into chaos, and then there's like, if they get too chaotic, they like cause the open and close things in the sky to like change a bit. So it was all interconnected, and yeah, it was like an AR app. You can see they sort of like blend in there. So the idea was that there was this like virtual living and growing creature that was like being symbiotic with everything that was in the real world. Yeah, so this is like a pretty rendered view of it, but yeah, so we've continued to work with him the last couple of years on some interesting new projects that have to do more with neural networks and machine learning. He collaborated with this lab that's in Japan that is studying how to use GANs to visualize what someone's looking at based on MRI data. So we had this collection of images he like commissioned with the lab that were these kind of crazy, chaotic, dreamlike things. And we had to figure out some way to pull them into a system that was like responding in real time. We tried a bunch of stuff of like how to get them 3D modeled, and it was quite hard because they kind of change form all the time. But I ended up playing around with some machine learning, so doing like some visual sorting, and then like doing some image-based translations. So like going from one to the other, so there could kind of be these smooth transitions between these ideas and dreams. And then again, like that system was in real time, so it was responding to different inputs from the gallery space and sort of morphing its system throughout the exhibition. We iterated on that work again for a festival that was in Japan in Okayama last year. Oh, that is not the Serpentine Gallery. This was in Okayama, and this one we actually did like a real-time system, so it was generating new images based on input from the site in real time, which was cool to play around with the lab scan. So that was just a few images from that. I threw in some experiments because I think experiments are important, and me and Don were talking the other day, and he was like, yeah, experiments. So this was an experiment that came just after the pyramid AR project with Pierre. ARKit got announced like the day before we launched that project, and we were like, no, this could have been like so much, because he really didn't want to put markers in the space, but we were talking about putting stuff. Anyway, that's how life goes. So I at the time did not have a lot of, I had some 3D experience, but I like am more from a film person, and I was like, well, it would be cool to put like animation into space. Like, could I use frames of like a stop motion? Oh, Ava's here. I think I see her in the chat. I saw she RSVP'd. I actually started working on this a little bit with an artist. Ava's waving. She's a VR AR artist in New York. We did a hackathon, and she does some really incredible work with dancers. And so we took some of the frames of her dancers, and we started playing with this idea of like, what if there was an animation that you had to like run through in order to see it? And that kind of led to this idea of Frame Runner, which is still a background. This was an early experiment with some hands. I don't actually have video of the one that I made with Eva, unfortunately, but I wanted to give her credit since she's here. So it's on the roof of my old studio. This was just like some stop motion I had from another video. And then started putting it like in scenes with 3D space. So this is my friend Russell. So like having him walk down a scene. I still have some stuff I want to explore with this. I just haven't really had time to do that the last year. Unfortunately, sometimes other work takes it over. And then took this to like an event form. So had a friend that was like, do something at this ad week thing. And I was like, okay. So we set up a photo booth with a green screen and got a bunch of people to do motion and then put them all into AR just to sort of show them how it worked. So we had like 20 people, like no one had ever seen AR before. They were like, oh, this is crazy. And I was like, no, it's not that hard. So just something to like really bring it into like a tangible way and like invite people into the creation process. I'd love to like automate this someday. Maybe that'll happen. And then on the note with AR, this is a project that launched earlier in May and is sort of an ongoing project that I've been working with a team from the Smithsonian and NASA who were doing some work with like getting young girls interested in STEM careers. And they got a grant from this project the Smithsonian's doing called Because of Her Story. And they were like, we want AR to get young girls interested in it. I was like, cool, what? And they were like, let's just like tell the story of women. And I was like, well, but there's like so many women. I remember talking to someone at a party and I was like, I think we can do 5 women. And they were like, that's it? Like, and I was like, I know, but budgets. And so it's an AR app for iOS and Android, and it is featuring women science heroes. So when I first was like, well, what is this? Because we were like, AR, we need a plan. Was starting to think about like all of the women that exist and what's in common with them, or sort of like what could we start to play with? So I was thinking of like these rings of women, of like core women, well, and they have mentors, and then we have historical women. I think in a lot of these projects for STEM careers, a lot of times it's like Amelia Earhart or Marie Curie, and they're really important, but I feel like they're harder to like grasp onto maybe when you're like 11 or 12. So we really wanted to bring some younger voices into the app and have some younger scientists talk about their careers and sort of the people. So it was like, maybe there's this like linking thing there, or maybe we tie it around events. And then like, how do we organize all these women? There was this idea for like a universe of women because it's like infinite and you can explore through them. And so I was thinking of like, oh, different kinds of science. Not all of that made it in, but I was able to come up, we designed this like expandable format so that we could have more women's stories and then some exploration stories, and then have it be something that like could get added to eventually. So the first part of it is sort of this universe where there's a lot more. I think we have 45 women in the universe, and they're just like really simple short stories. So you sort of use it like an astrology app or an astronomy app, and you look around and you can like interact with the different women. And then we have like a set of featured women who you hear a bit more about their careers. And was trying to think through if we could like make the interactions similar to like something you need in science. And so came up with like a couple. I think I just finished that interactive project with the ad agency. So I was thinking a lot about like talking to people, and I was like, oh, this would be really cool if you could like let them talk to the scientists. And it actually fits in well. COVID has helped this project. We didn't have budget to like go shoot all these people who are all over and they're really busy. So we just like, we're like, oh, it'll be like a Skype thing. We'll like fake a Skype call. So with the featured scientists, there's like a chat feature, and there's a bunch of questions and you can ask them different things. These were a couple clips.
I think the thing that inevitably is associated with me is the discovery of pulsars, which I did when I was just a grad student. Having done that as a grad student, it has given me many opportunities subsequently.
So we had like an array of questions. This is Jocelyn Burnell, who discovered pulsars when she was a grad student, which is insane. And then she also like told us about like how hard it has been being the only female often in her career. This is Katie Coleman.
Chemistry is really interesting to study in space because in space we don't have a lot of gravity. We have a tiny, tiny bit, but it's so small. It doesn't affect a lot of the things that we're trying to measure. And one of my favorite things about chemistry is growing crystals to purify things.
I won't do all of them because we're running out of time. So we just have, I think each woman has about 10 to 12 questions, and sort of ranging from like career oriented to like, what's your hobby? But just sort of like relatable things, and having them talk in sort of a Skype format. And then they also have an explore feature. So there's some like AR element that has something to do with their career. This is one of the most popular ones. It's Mars, and you can actually like use it and go walk the surface of Mars. It's like a terrain from one of the rovers. People like that one. But so each one has their own like explore feature that's narrated by the woman and is like some little part of their job. And we also have, they wanted a photo booth. They're like, take away something. So we made it sort of this like career explorer so that you could find your own place in the universe. So we're adding some more content to this, but sort of just starting to get them thinking about what different possible careers are and sort of what the skills might be for those. Especially when you're that young, I think being like, oh, an astronaut, that's like so far away. And so trying to like give them a little bit of like knowledge early on to pursue that. So yeah, that's my presentation of all the things.
That was so awesome. Thank you so much. That was so good. I like just the amount of work you've done. I'm just like blown away. There's a lot of stuff there that I knew about, but a lot of stuff that I had no idea about, and given context to how you got to that project and how it evolved, it's just really great. Yeah, so we have like 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have enough for questions. So if you guys have questions, any of you have any, feel free to either throw them in the chat or you can just ask if you'd like. I'm going to start it out with a question actually, because it definitely like you brought up early on that you like to use faces, and it was like, I think it was the eye one, and I noticed like you use actors quite a bit, like it keeps it really personable. It also, like, a lot of times it's very difficult to create a dialogue between the user and the work, but naturally, like, do you find naturally, like, do you use like actors in order to carry that narrative as like a tool for that in that way?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that came from the story side, or like coming from a film background, is it was just like the natural way to do things.
Do you end up writing, like when you're writing the script, do you write the script for those things whenever you're like trying to think of them, like what is the person going to say, or what is like, do you go about it in a film way to write actors in?
For some of them, yeah. For the Overheard, we had a screenwriter that I worked with on it. So I worked with him. We did a lot of the story development, and then he wrote a bunch of stories, and then I sort of did the pass on top of that like put it into the physical space, if that makes sense, or like adding stuff, or like making sure it sort of fits in. And like, it's really weird when you have to start pacing a story for a physical location, or you're like reading it and you're like, I'm in this room too long. I would never have stayed in this room this long. And you have to sort of like redistribute story points in that way.
That makes sense. I never would have thought of that.
I still do some more traditional video work in like my professional life, and I've had the opportunity to do some more writing recently.
That's awesome. It's such an interesting way to interact with a narrative too, spatially.
And like, how do you break it up? And it's sort of like this really big challenge that we have to figure out of, it's like for the one versus many, and that's like a really big challenge of working in this space at all is, and even like the eyeball wall, the first time we showed it, they put a bar in front of it and it would just attach. So somebody like stood there and it would just lock on them. And so like, we updated it so that it would forget people if they were like too boring. If they stood still for too long, it would just like disengage with him and like pick up the next thing. So awesome. It's sort of just like weird things like that. I don't know. I feel like the tech bits are people too.
Well, it's interesting because like when you start building like that's the kind of, you had brought up like how like you're working on an experiment and then ARKit came out and you're like, ah. But I oftentimes find that even when those technical things come out, like you're kind of just filling the void with like tech. You're like, oh, we need to fix this problem, so we're going to build something to do it. But the reason why you're doing it doesn't go away. And I think a lot of work that I see, like when ARKit and a lot of the tech comes out, people don't have a reason to use it yet. So it becomes really like, even though it's out, like it doesn't really help until they have an idea.
Or there's a piece I didn't put in here, but is like more on the art side piece, because I haven't had as much time to involve that, that actually came out of that first projection mapping project. It's a piece called Touch, and it has a live actor in it, and there's like a camera set up on the side, and there's just like a hole and you put your arm in it and it like projects onto the actor and she like responds to it. It's like the lowest tech thing ever. It's literally just like a camera into a projector like set up in a way, but people like love it and are engaged by it, and it's weird because it is this like very human element. And sort of like pulling at this conflict of like the digital versus the real and like making those meet. So it's never been about like the high tech side of things. If you only care about the high tech, I think your project's like set out to fail most of the time.
Yeah, definitely. Like, no, that's amazing. Cause also like the personality that comes with the work and the fun that comes with just being around people and having fun, that if you can put that in a piece of work, it does a lot, and you do very, very nicely.
I miss that. I miss people in space. I mean, that's the best part about interactive work is like unleashing it on the public and like watching them break it in ways that you could never expect them to, or like have fun or use it in a totally different way than you intended.
So somebody was talking, I forget who the quote was, but I was talking to somebody and they're building an application. They're like trying to ask their higher up, like, why are we building this? What is this supposed to be? And they're trying to build all these features, and their higher up was just like, no, just make it and let people play with it. And then we'll see what they like. And then they'll tell us. And that was like really, really profound to be like, oh yeah, that's how you find the feedback from humans.
That's like the magic there. I mean, there's like an IDEO clip about prototyping that it was for this Elmo app they made, like a monster app. And it's like the Wizard of Ozing prototype. And they just literally have a phone cut out on like foam core and have someone acting it out as they like do the touches. And it's just like, I don't know, do it as cheaply and quickly as possible the first time and see how it works, and then see where it goes.
That's awesome. We have a few more minutes. Anybody want to jump in with a question? Let me see. If I had Facebook up, I'd check.
I've got a question. Mandy, thank you so much. That was really awesome. I had a question. I was wondering what kind of future projects that you have coming up that you're super excited about, or if there's any type of future ideas going forward or something that you want to get into that you're thinking of as like the next thing that you haven't really done yet, but like you're excited to get into.
Well, I guess on the not tech side, I have like a documentary film I've sort of been backburnering for the last couple of years that I want to get made about the internet and the physicality of it. And then I have a project I actually need to like pick up again that for the entirety of last year, I saved every single terms and service agreement that was offered to me. I was really interested. My original idea was like, I'm going to record them all and then I'm going to like film myself reading them out loud and make an installation out of it. And I quickly was like, there's no way I could do this. I don't know the final count, but I have at least like 1,500 to 2,000 pages of like legal agreements. If not more. I broke Google Docs because I had to keep just adding new ones. It was like too many pages. But really just like thinking about all of, I don't know. I think as someone that uses a lot of tech, I don't know if I see more of them because I use a lot of different softwares, or like how much legalese is presented at people and we're expected just to like sign off on it. And like, I'm going to do the calculations of how much a lawyer would cost me to like read all of those and just sort of, I don't know. I think maybe between that and sort of working as like a contractor or a small business, like you just deal with a lot of that on your own. And it just seems like this unfair thing. But also thinking it made me like, it was like this meditative thing of having to record them all that I had to stop and think about it, and I'd get frustrated and then be like, wait, but this is like what you're agreeing to. So yeah, have some machine learning experiment stuff, some more GAN stuff that I like got to start exploring last year on the work with Pierre, that you're always like, I'll do this afterwards, and then just finding the time to dive back in. So those are my current things I'm thinking about.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for coming out. We do, yeah, we're gonna do this next month as well. But yeah, this month was definitely like, it's awesome to have Mandy, and Mandy's like Austin based, so it's amazing to have somebody too who's traveled quite a bit.
I'm excited too. I moved back to Austin about a year ago. Sadly, have not gotten to meet a lot of people in the scene here. So I'm looking forward to connecting with more people in Austin, because that is what I miss the most about being local in New York.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out and keep up with her work. And yeah, we'll make sure we continue the discussion. Reach for the Stars on like on your app. Phone is an app for your phone that you can download and check out. And she's got awesome work on her website as well. So feel free to check out that stuff too. Barna has something to announce as well.
I wanted to make an announcement real quick, and maybe Mandy, you would like to be part of it as well. So next month, the meeting the Space Lab meeting will not be at the end of the month, but kind of in the beginning because of Thanksgiving. Sorry, the middle. So it's November 18, and we're gonna have Joshua King from Dallas Aurora. We're gonna host him for an hour or so. So this is November 18 at 6 o'clock in the evening, and Joshua is the executive director of which started out as a light festival in Dallas. And now, because of COVID, it's no longer a biannual event. It will be continuously curated, no longer a festival, but just something that stays year-round in Dallas or in that metro complex. So we are hoping to know more about their curatorial practice and maybe even business practice, and just like what is their vision for the future, especially in this COVID era. So I hope you guys gonna be able to join us.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, stay tuned for next month, Aurora, and thank you, Mandy, again. And thanks everyone for coming out. Yeah, this is Space Lab. Find us on Meetup and also on the Facebook. We have a Facebook group, so feel free to jump in and also donate if you'd like for the scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.